Hello! It's been a while. I can't figure out how I used to structure my weeks before I made these videos. Music swap suggestions this week are Paul Simon oriented. Check out Leaves That Are Green and Slip Sliding Away, links in the description. Both are thematically tied to this video, and I really like Paul Simon because his kind of loneliness is my kind of loneliness. Except for, of course, better articulated. Anyway, yesterday morning I was looking through somebody who shall remain nameless's Facebook photos. I'm not so classy as to avoid Facebook stalking, but I am not so unclassy as to tell you who I stalked. The only thing you really need to know about this person is that they're incredibly busy. Because this person was so busy, they have tons and tons of photos. And I was sitting there scrolling through all of their pictures of like parties that they attended and concerts they went to and dates they went on. And then I clicked back over to my scant collection of photos and thought about how I was so unhappy for about 90% of the photos I was in. And I started wishing I could go back there and force myself to go to those parties and attend those concerts and ask those people out on dates and generally force myself to be a happier person. But then of course realizing simultaneously that that couldn't happen because time tortuously only moves in one direction. And then I was sucker punched by something that was either grief or nostalgia. It was so close to both emotions in fact that I'm starting to think that nostalgia may be a kind of grief. So then my brain started going a little haywire and I decided to calm down by playing a round of That Makes Me Think Of, courtesy of Zay Frank. Check it out in the description. And here are the results of that. So, nostalgia. As you might expect, nostalgia makes me think of childhood, but not in a very specific way. Like, I don't think of particular instances that I flash back to and have these warm, fuzzy feelings about. Instead, I think of sort of a strangely positive blur. And this interpretation of my childhood is something I started thinking a lot about in college. I always thought that I had had a really happy childhood, but then I started realizing that I don't actually have that many memories from childhood. I only have flashes here and there. But something I do remember is that around age 12, life started getting difficult really quickly. Like, I can't imagine that all of life's crappiness hit me all at once because, you know, when things go badly, they usually go badly in a series of unfortunate events. It makes me think that I must have been ignoring it as it built up around the edges and I was just sitting there with my finger in the dam going, la 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 la, I can't hear you! Or maybe present me is just suppressing all of those bad memories and I'm left with some sort of patinaed shell of what my childhood was actually like. And that makes me think of a story a friend told me in college. We'll call this person George for convenience's sake. George grew up in what you could euphemistically call an unhappy household, meaning that his family was monetarily very wealthy but emotionally very poor. And during the summer, George would go hang out with these so-called friends of his that would actually kind of tease him and make him feel bad about himself. George remembers sitting on a boat one summer reading while all of these people that he didn't really like and who didn't really like him hung out around him. And George, because he knows what he was like as a child, knows that he was miserable. But in college, looking back, that memory became sugar-coated and George started thinking of it as a time when he didn't have anything to do. George was misremembering his own past, which is weird, right? Because it's your past. You should be able to know it. And that makes me think of this theory that these neuroscientists have that actually when you remember something, you're re-remembering it, meaning you're recreating it from scratch in your brain. With every iteration where you re-remember a memory, there's a chance that you can construe that memory. And in that way, your present self subtly rewrites your past self, which is terrifying, but is also backed up by evidence, like the fact that people's flashbulb memories, memories of really traumatic events like 9/11, are oftentimes not accurate, which is freaking terrifying to me because I want to know who I am. It makes me look more skeptically back at my Facebook photos. Maybe present me is looking back on those photos and making the highs higher and the lows lower. Maybe college wasn't as bad as I thought it was and my childhood wasn't as good as I thought it was. And that makes me think back to the environment that my childhood was actually conducted in, and this poem that I've developed a bit of a crush on called This Is the Time of Grasshoppers and All I See Is Dying by Adrienne C. Lewis. Go check it out in the description, really, it's very good. This poem takes place in a very small town in the western United States during a drought, which makes me feel right at home because, incidentally, I grew up in a very small town in the western United States during a drought. In the poem, the narrator cuts between scenes with the love of his life, Colleen, and his growing up. He, the narrator, contrasts his virulent, swarming, sparkling love for Colleen with what he calls, and I quote, some unholy replay of just 1 hour in some nearly forgotten time and space, aka memories from when he was young and cruel. Throughout the poem, insects, symbolizing destruction, feature prominently, from the children of the earth that the narrator burns alive, to the titular grasshoppers. The insects even begin to threaten Colleen, like the demented grasshopper that hops on her ear as if to devour her along with the landscape. By the end of the poem, you get the sense that the narrator is living in the last gasp of the present, or at least his present, and that once his sparkling love Colleen dies, death will be the only thing visible to him. At some point in the not-so-distant future, the so-called insects from his past will overwhelm him, and he'll be chewed alive by memory and nostalgia. And that makes me think that I really don't want to be that guy. You know, I'd really like to not be overwhelmed by my nostalgia. I can intellectualize it all I want, but really I just want to either learn from it or minimize it. And I could do this a couple of different ways. I could, for example, pull a David Hume, and after spending pages and pages agonizing on the definition of humanness on a treatise on human nature, I could put down my pen and play backgammon, oh who am I kidding, solitaire, until I forgot about it. Or I could not. See, I don't think my nostalgia is going to go away just because I ignore it. In fact, I think it's probably going to intensify with time, which means I should probably start learning how to deal with it right now, but I don't know where to go from here. So what say ye? How do you deal with nostalgia? And I hope this wasn't too heavy for my first video back. I'll see y'all next time. I was 21 years when I wrote this song. 22 now, but I won't be for long. And generally just force myself to be a happier, charminger.